Mr. Weezar, Mr. Rosenthal, myself, Bernard Parks, as chair, and Mr. Smith, I understand, is en route. We have 6 items on closed session, which we will take up first. When we come back, we'll deal with items 7 and 13 together, and then we'll go through the agenda. Let me ask colleagues on item 10, there's a consensus we can move that on consent as it relates to dealing with our bond issues for the
so moved.
Sanitation. Let me ask if we move that on consent item 10, that we ask the clerk to, on page 2 of the CAO report, that we capture most of that information in paragraphs 2 through 7 that identify the amount of money, the bonding agencies that will be selling the bonds, commenting on the debt ceiling limits of the city, also the financial advisory service, organization, and also the disclosure of bond and tax counsel services, and that we also realize in moving this item that we're also moving attachment B, C, D, and E, and F with this document, and that I ask also that we get with the city attorney and make sure that the ordinance accompanies this item when it gets to council. And so we can make sure the city attorney is addressing that for us. Also, colleagues, if we can move item 11, which is outside counsel, unless you have some comments on specific cases, we can move that item on consent.
So moved.
Otherwise, if there's specific cases, we'd have to move those items to closed session. Greg, we've moved item 10 with certain instructions dealing with the waste revenue bonds, and number 11 we're talking about on the outside counsel. Okay. Also, let me ask on item 11, we will move that on consent. I'd ask the CA to get with the clerk of the committee, and we'd like to get some information as to the city attorney's strategy as he's talked about reducing costs in outside counsel, so that we're not dealing with those case by case, but we have an overall strategy. And also, if you could get us with this report some comparison over the last 2 fiscal years at this point in time, the amount of money that we're spending. So we'll move that item 11 as it relates to those instructions. We'll come back again after closed session and deal with 7 and 13 together, and then we'll follow with the agenda.
Okay, and then I'll turn that. Okay. That was quick. And you guys are going to take 7 and 13 together?
Yeah.
The interview then. Casey. Yeah. And they have interviewed clerks. So that'll probably be on the 10 o'clock news tonight.
Thank you. We're going to reconvene the regular meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. What I will go through now is we have public comment, Dr. Williams, and then we'll go to the cards for 7 and 13, which will be the first two items that we're dealing with.
Very short. My name is Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno. Given the bonds and various other things that are being considered, I'd highly recommend that you start looking at how much it's going to cost us and from where the money is going to come from to operate and maintain these facilities for the next 20, 40, 50 years. One of the issues, DWP has had a few leaks. Why? It's called deferred maintenance. This is not rocket science. When you see a riveted steel pipe, it means that you have to maintain it. You have to have the money to maintain it for the next 40, 50 years. Thank you.
Mr. McQuiston, you have a card in for item 7.
Jim McQuiston. If we look at the budget for the next fiscal year, which is estimated right now at a deficit of $800 million, it looks like we should have a cushion this year. Otherwise, we're never going to make it through the next fiscal year, which means that we really need a big surplus, probably $200 or $300 million this year, just to be in dire straits for the next fiscal year. So we're really, really down. Now, we have, you might say, a statutory increasing deficit of between $27 and $30 million every single year, and it's going to get higher. This is because we haven't taken action to cure this. It takes legal action, and we have a good chance of doing this. Every year this accumulates, we've accumulated a backlog of about $600 million because of inaction. $600 million. Just think of what that would do to our budgets every year, $600 million extra year. The mayor is got to do a survey before this can start, and I've urged them to get busy on the survey. They should have had this done in August. It's still outstanding. There's nothing that this committee can do about it except from an oversight position to urge the mayor to really get busy on that survey. It's a confidential survey.
Got to wrap it up.
Yeah, it's a confidential survey. We don't want it to get out too publicly, but we have to get that stuff really fast. Otherwise, the soup is really going to get worse.
Thank you very much. We have Mary Benson and Nina Royal, and they're both on item 13.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Mary Benson, and I'm a candidate for Council District 2, but also a budget representative on the Neighborhood Council Budget Committee. And this is an extremely important, public safety is an extremely important issue to neighborhood councils. And because I do represent the North Valley, I would ask that these budgets and furloughs be delineated. We have a neighborhood council Congress coming up in October. The budget is going to be discussed, and some of the details of what this means in terms of man hours on the street is really an important issue to communicate to the general public. Public safety, we cut the fire department and furloughed them right before the fires. My concern is with the declining economies, we're going to be cutting our police just when we need them most. Thank you.
Let me just say for the public, first of all, The issue of the operational plans, they're going to be directed by this committee. And secondly, there was no action to furlough firefighters before the fire, so we just want to make sure the public's fully aware of that.
Thank you.
Now we have the last card we have. Do you have a card in? They do. I'm sorry, we do have. And then next would be Peter Repovich on 7 and 13.
Good afternoon. My name is Nina Royal. I'm the Vice President of the Sunland Tonga Neighborhood Council in charge of the Safety Committee, and I'm President of the Sunland Tonga Safety and Emergency Response Volunteer Services. I suggest that to save money, you stop all the free giveaways, all of the permits, all of the festivals, everything. Stop it all. When we have no money, you don't use a credit card, you don't write a check. The first thing we need to do is ensure public safety. If you take the budget back for the police and the fire back to 1993, Sunland Tujunga had the worst reporting district in the Foothill Division, and you'll see that happen again. We have been working for years to upgrade the community to make it safe for our constituents, and you're going to put us back to square one. So I am asking you to please find other ways, starting with give the neighborhood councils the responsibility of taking care of their little festivals, their fairs, etc. And the city should not be putting on any kind of festivals, no, nothing, until the basics of the quality of life that are necessity for the city to live in a peaceful and harmony are taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. We have items both 7 and 13.
Good afternoon. I'm Peter Repovich, Director, Los Angeles Police Protective League. I have Tyler Eisen, Director, Los Angeles Police Protective League, to my left. To my right is Captain Jerry Weinstein from the Command Officers Association. We are here today in solidarity. I appreciate your time and energy put forth on the budget. The Los Angeles Police Protective League comes to you to emphasize the importance of having public safety as the #1 budgetary priority in the city. We cannot experience an economic recovery without continuing public safety as that #1 goal. Unfortunately, I am here to call your attention to the consideration of furloughing and laying off Los Angeles police officers, which would be catastrophic to public safety and to the citizens of Los Angeles. Based on a figure of 10,000 police officers, the city, under the proposed furlough plan, would lose approximately 1,600 officers. When you look at it from attrition, layoff, and furloughs altogether, that number becomes 2,254 each day during the furlough period. Cutting our patrol force in half is not in the best interest of the citizens of Los Angeles. It makes no sense to furlough experienced, highly trained police officers and at the same time hire new officers who require training. We need to immediately stop hiring police officers. Hiring new officers and then furloughing seasoned officers is nothing more than a shell game. It makes no sense to continue hiring when the LAPD needs to cut the budget by $130 million. The city needs to live by the Octomom philosophy. The city cannot keep adding to the LAPD family if we can't support the officers we already have. Thank you very much.
And just for the public's awareness, I think the council took a motion at least 2 budgets ago that public safety is the #1 priority. And I think if you look at our numbers, that we're well over 70% of our operating budget is police and fire. It would be a clear indication where we put the money and our priorities are. So we support that, but also we also realize that the dollars are drifting or dropping significantly, and just in this year we're 75 million short of our goal. But again, 70% of our budget historically has gone into the police and fire, and that's the commitment that we've had for the last several years. Mr. Chair. Thank you.
If I could comment as well, the $130 million that you're looking at as a reality to deal with, we obviously need to look at that. I totally agree with you that no furloughs or layoffs of officers makes any sense whatsoever. And so if we can work together on where we find the $130 million in cuts in the overall budget, that would be the right direction for us to do.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just for a clarification, for you, when you said no new hiring, are you talking about hiring for attrition, which is our current policy, or cutting it off totally?
Stop the hiring, cut it off.
Thank you.
Until we get a handle on this.
That would be appropriate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can we have the city staff, CAO, CLA, to come up, please?
Sir, do you want me to read the items? No? Okay. Item 7 is basically the CAO and CLA to report on the status of the 2009-10 budget, including recommendations in response to the council's recent actions on department operational plans, furloughs, layoffs, alternative cost-saving measures, and related matters as instructed by council on September 16, 2009. And item 13 is Budget and Finance Committee minority report and fiscal emergency resolution relative to sworn furloughs and the 2009-10 budget balancing operational plan.
Okay. Colleagues, the reason that we have these two items on the agenda, it's my hope that on the minority report, item 13, because many of those directives have been amended and maybe are no longer relevant because of the actions we took last Friday, I'd like to be able to move item 13 back to council with what would be the most appropriate recommendations per number on the report so that the council could endorse it. Item 3 is a more general item in which we want to get an update from the CAO, CLA as to those remaining issues that are necessary to fulfill the actions that we took last Friday. And I have a number of requests that I'd hope that we can get done in assigning them to the CAO and the CLA, that we get them done over the next 2 budget committee meetings. And so that's the reason we've merged them, but there's a lot of loose ends that I think we are going to have to resolve. But what's most important is on 13 is giving clear direction as to those, the number of things that are listed on that report. And also, just for everyone's awareness, we will not be moving the resolution that was before the council on Friday, because almost all of the things that are in that resolution have been resolved by the actions of the council on Friday. So we will not be dealing with the resolution today. So if we can ask the CEO to come up, and we'd like to have the both the CEO and CLA to comment on the issues dealing with the item 13 and the most appropriate manner that we can bring this back to council. And we'd ask Lorraine if we can possibly get this before council this week so that we can get this these items resolved. And then, like I said, the more extended items are item 3, which we hope to get resolved in the next 2 committee meetings. So if we can get an overview and a kind of a synopsis of what we did Friday, what's still in your mind is lingering, what are some of the things that are in priority that we should be addressing, and then we can move from there.
Good afternoon, Miguel Santana, CAO. Well, we had a meeting this morning to sort of really look at whatever loose ends we have as a result of Friday's action. Clearly, we've asked the actuary to come back to the council and provide a report no later than October 6th on the 1% that those participants of the ERIP program will be asked to contribute. That report should be completed within the next several days and before your council prior to the 6th, so that it is included in the final action that your council takes 30 days from Friday. In addition to that, there's a letter of clarification that my office is preparing to the coalition, describing a schedule of meetings that we'll be having between now and the end of the fiscal year, and also articulating that the January financial status report will be utilized as a way of looking at where we're at in the implementation of ERIP, as well as any discussion and thoughts about what we're going to do for the next fiscal year. And that letter should go out in the next few days. In addition to that, your council is expected to still have engaged in an analysis of how to address the remaining shortfall that we have with the non-coalition departments, and we're using the operational plans that have been submitted as a starting point to look at how to best address that $58 million problem that we have. Our office will work closely with the mayor's office and the CLA's office to come back to this committee as well as to the larger council with a recommendation on how to meet that shortfall. We hope to achieve that work in the next several days, and I think having it before this council along with the accompanying resolutions in 2 weeks makes good sense as a time frame so that we consider everything collectively. We're continuing negotiations with PPL, and the ERC committee will provide me direction tomorrow at tomorrow's meeting at 8 a.m. So overall, I think we're building upon the work that was done last week. The work is going to intensify, not less so. Departments have been instructed to submit their whatever list they have to personnel, so that process could begin in terms of layoffs for non-coalition members. So the work proceeds. It hasn't stopped.
Sharon So, CLA's office. I don't have much more to add besides what Mr. Santana has already indicated. With regard to the work that's going to be ensuing in the next few days, our office, along with the mayor's staff and CAO, will be reviewing those operational plans. As you recall, the operational plans did contemplate 2 scenarios. The one that was presented before you a week and a half ago contemplated the ERIP not happening. And so under the conditions of ERIP happening, some of the recommendations or some of the discussions related to the operational plan were not presented. So we will be going forward and analyzing those and coming back to you with a package to address the remaining shortfall, which we believe is somewhere in the range of $60 to $70 million at this point. However, that it will be contingent on us being able to ensure getting certain concessions during the context of discussions in ERC, as well as some of the savings that were expected to be achieved under the agreement with the Coalition of Unions. So with that, we can go through the minority report that you considered last week, which was referred back to this committee. We can go through those item by item, and there may be some additional recommendations that we would make in order to just track some of the savings that we're going to be hopefully achieving through the agreement with the coalition, as well as just follow-up report backs and with regard to what we do with police hiring, as well as what we do with the emergency declaration. So we can walk through each one of those.
Let me ask, in the CAO's been a part of the discussion on these recommendations on number 13?
Yes.
That's these recommendations?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you walk through item 13, and I believe we have something in the neighborhood of 18 different items that was listed, and give us your recommendations as to how we should proceed and what we should be forwarding to the council and what we should be holding in committee. And I have one question starting off with the first one. On Friday, we substituted the new early retirement plan for what was listed as number 1.
Yes, and so we would recommend that you receive and file recommendation 1 of the minority report.
Okay.
I'll copy out first.
Yeah. Kelly, do we have another copy?
Yes.
You give Mr. Reesar, Mr. Rosenthal.
Now 18, this is the one that I brought up late at night that night.
That's going to be part of the report back of Bureau of Engineering.
Okay.
If you'd like, I can continue and just go item by item.
See if we have enough copies of a little synopsis.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Okay, item number 2, which relates to, it's 2A through E. A2, it relates to the mandatory furlough program. The first recommendation, A, relates to the council canceling meetings on every other Friday. We would recommend that you receive and file that, as operational plans will likely change as a result of the ERIP proposal that was approved. So we would recommend that you receive and file recommendation number 2A. Recommendations 2B and C, as it relates to the furlough plans, we would recommend that you send those 2 recommendations back to EERC pending further discussions. 2D,
That was
I'm sorry.
B and C?
That was 2B, C, and E. And then on recommendation number 2D, which instructs the general managers to implement these work schedules, we would recommend that you actually hold that recommendation in Budget and Finance Committee pending further discussions with ERC. This may ultimately go forward at some point, but we would recommend that you hold that recommendation in committee at this time. Recommendation number 3.
I just want to make sure I understand
Yes.
this. So number 2, because of what we were able to accomplish with the coalition last week, causes us to pause on these at the moment.
Yes.
Okay.
Recommendation number 3, as it relates to the layoff of 926 employees, would recommend that you actually hold that recommendation as well, pending review of new operational plans that we will be coming forward in the next week or so. Recommendation 4, as it relates to instructing personnel to calculate the necessary layoffs, once again, we would recommend that you hold that recommendation pending the new operational plan. Recommendation 5 is an instruction to general managers as it relates to the layoffs. We would recommend that you hold that as well. As well as recommendation number 6, which instructs the CAO and controllers to freeze vacant positions or layoff positions in PACER. So we'd recommend that you hold that. Recommendation number 7, as it relates to requesting the mayor as part of the upcoming fiscal year budget to eliminate all positions frozen, we would recommend that you actually approve that recommendation and send that forward to council.
And how many positions are we talking about? Do we know?
And that's unknown at this time. But this is conceptually, we would recommend that any of these positions that are recommended for as part of being frozen, to recommend that they be eliminated to continue the budget savings for next year, as we're looking at a potential.
Will we get a list of what they are?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Recommendation number 8 relates to actually implementing the deferred cost of living adjustments for the coalition. We would actually recommend that you hold this recommendation in committee pending ratification by the coalition. Recommendations number 9, 10, and 11. Number 9 relates to forming a working group of CAO, CLA personnel as it relates to the operational plans. Number 10, as it relates to identifying placement opportunities for employees. And recommendation number 11, relative to the city's employees assistance program to assist employees at risk of layoff. We would recommend that you improve 9, 10, and 11 and forward those recommendations to council. Recommendation number 12 relates to developing a cash-based separation incentive program. That recommendation is now moved. We would recommend that you receive and file that recommendation. Number 13, as it relates to the emergency declaration, this one is the one that there has been a lot of discussion. We would actually recommend that at this point that recommendation be held in this committee and pending further discussions within ERC and how we progress on negotiations. However, there is one critical element as it relates to this, and that is with the police hiring plan. There is a police class that is scheduled to be hired in the beginning of October, if I remember correctly. And that decision, we would recommend, at least our office would recommend, that you defer that decision on the police hiring. If there is a desire at some point to actually hire all of those positions, it's a class of about 37 positions. We would recommend that you, if the decision is made to hire those folks later, that you simply either bump the class 1 month forward or potentially even adding some additional recruits to the upcoming 10 classes. But at this time, to give us a little bit of time to fully assess where we are with regard to our overall budget situation, we would recommend, from the CLA standpoint, that we would recommend that you defer that class. And
By defer, excuse me, does that mean the 37 that you had mentioned, are they in a class now, or these are recruits that might go into a class? They're not hired yet, but are they students in the recruiting?
They haven't been hired yet. They haven't started the process yet. It's my understanding that this class is not expected to start till October 14th.
Have they been notified?
I have not. I'm not aware of that, unless someone from personnel is here.
We have a group ready
For the record.
Assistant Chief Sharon Papa, LAPD. We have a group that we are ready to extend offers to. They've completed the entire selection process. That's where they're at this point.
If I could also ask you about those 37, would that be new hire above the attrition numbers, or would that be just part of an attrition?
Hiring to attrition, which is what we've been authorized to do at this point.
And what's the last day you can notify them?
Well, we always want them to give 2 weeks' notice to their employers, so we wouldn't want them to do it much beyond this week.
That gets back to a more fundamental issue. Do we hire to attrition or not hire to attrition? Is that correct?
Correct.
And from the attrition standpoint, how many new hires do we need to hire to get to that attrition?
Well, as you know, it's not an exact number, Councilman. It depends on how many come and go. So that number, the 37 number, is what we think will keep us on track for attrition this year.
I see. Thank you.
But if we decided to bump that class, we could always meld them into future classes because we can realistically take about 50. Is that right?
We can. We've been trying to keep classes at 40. We were hiring classes of 50 prior to that.
it actually may be less than 50 because there are at least, I think, 9 classes between now and the end of the fiscal year. So really, it's talking about adding maybe 4 to 5 recruits per class, which would bring your level to somewhere around 40 to 42 recruits for the remainder of the year.
If attrition stays where it's at, but it always has ebb and flow through the
That's
year.
correct.
And usually around Christmas time, we get a larger group, don't we?
That's
file papers. So we're projecting, based on historical averages, how many this year do you
The
think?
budget projection was based on a constant number in each class going forward, but obviously we adjust as we go.
Yeah, so it was 480,
480, but that also included recruit attrition as well.
but I'm asking, is 480 where we're currently on that slope for this year?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, here's what I'd like to ask Miguel. Okay, we're looking at 37 in this class. And my gut instincts tell me that if we deferred the hiring of them, as time goes on and the situation continues, we might be in a difficult spot of hiring to attrition. Do you agree that we could hold off a couple of days and think this through? Because I frankly want to hire to attrition.
Well, it seems to me that the class starts October 14th, correct?
Correct. We would want them to give notice to their employers no later than this Monday, because that's 2 weeks away from when they would be starting, ideally Friday.
So the plan is to give notice on Friday.
Correct.
And so once the notice is given, I'm sorry, I'm not as familiar with your process, what happens between the time that they receive notice and the time they start?
Obviously, they're getting ready to start the academy.
Right.
They've got to prepare childcare, whatever their personal situation is, to make sure they're ready to go when that academy class starts.
That's party week. That's when they party.
And if I may just add, Councilman Rosendahl, if we were to stop hiring, we would attrit out 300 people between now and the end of the fiscal year. We would be down 300 officers if we discontinued hiring to attrition.
Yeah, so that's why I'm very much in favor of hiring rather than slowing it down, if in fact that would cause us to end up with less officers than we presently have, which is something I don't believe we should ever go in that direction. We need to find savings within the police budget, but not by not bringing in cadets that fill the attrition needs of the city.
Well, the current budget, from my understanding, assumes the hiring, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And so my only point was, if we were to stop now and not pick it up again, we would lose approximately 300. We would be down 300 officers by June.
If you stop the whole year.
Correct.
Not just.
Correct.
So then if the current budget assumes hiring, to stop the hiring, would there have to be a policy decision made by the council to reverse the action of the budget?
The issue is, I think, on this issue of deferring, we still have 8 months to make a decision as to whether you recoup that class or continue to hire any of the remaining classes. So you have 8 months to make that decision. The reason for this is to give the CAO and CLA some breathing room as it relates to the first part of number 13 as the negotiations goes forward.
Right.
To determine what the package might be. And so these are things that I think the reason that we're making that recommendation. The other thing I'd like to ask Sharon on the first part of number 13, and certainly concur that we amend that emergency declaration, but I think we need to put in a specific period of time that gives Miguel some guidance as to his negotiations so that it's clearly not forever, but we do need some report back as to some serious negotiation within a 2-week period so that we can make sure that's part of the 13A.
2 weeks sounds appropriate.
And I would agree with that. I think we need a reach resolution on the negotiations as soon as possible. I guess in response to your question, in my mind, offers could be made, but the class doesn't start till the 14th. So that, for me, is the drop dead deadline. Is there any reason why I shouldn't think about it that way?
Yeah.
I would hope that we don't tell someone to quit their job and then turn around and say, never mind.
Sure. But again, I think you got 8 months to recoup. And I think what I would hope we can do is come up with a package regarding our sworn personnel as opposed to deal with this incrementally. And so that's what we hope is going to happen during the negotiations, that we have a package of how all of this impacts, and then we're not hiring and then find out we spent money we don't have and all the other good stuff.
Mr. Chair, if I might also add to, and that was kind of the intent, was actually really just to defer the classes, to give us some time, because we need to come back to the council with the revised operational plan, which shows how we're going to balance the remaining deficit. The deal with the coalition only addressed part of the deficit. We are not done here. There is still a gap that remains to be addressed. And it's a question of how you wish to address it. If you are telling us that you absolutely do not want to take police hiring off the table, we understand that, and then we will come up with an operational plan that takes that into consideration. If you're saying absolutely we do not wish to furlough police officers, we can take that into consideration as well. That is the whole intent. The critical juncture of this was that with police department, we really didn't want to get into a situation where offers were made and then that would have tied our hands with regard to this upcoming class. And that decision would have costed you an additional $2 million if you decided to stop hiring. So the intent was really just to defer it, to give you some time. We need to come back to you quickly, because the longer that we delay, the more difficult it will be to address the gap.
What is the next class after October 14th?
It'll be November 12th. I believe they have a class every...
It's every 28 days. It would be November. I don't know the date off the top of my head.
Chief, historically, we always, through the year, go up and down above them. Attrition doesn't keep pace with what we're putting in the class. And we found at the end of the year, the last few years, we've been recruiting above what we planned. Where are we right now in our plan for so far this year?
I think right now we're a few above. I notice came through this morning, I want to say we're 18 or so above, which is why the class is a little bit less, 37, assuming attrition. Instead of putting 40 in, it was 37.
Well, we're already ahead of plan a little bit.
A little bit, but...
Yeah, I understand.
Like
It's like I said, it's
yeah.
a month-to-month calculation, and I know that. So
Correct.
I think it's important for us to understand we're already a little ahead, basically a half a class ahead of schedule anyway. So the delay of 1 month, one class is really only deferring about 18 positions, then 19 positions that you would have put in the academy anyway.
That's probably, if my memory serves me right, I can scroll back through and try to find my
I trust
update.
you,
but-
yeah. And again, it's not an exact science. It's going to be 1 or 2 up or down. But the point is, half the people are already in there now. So realistically, we're not losing 37 positions we could have put in now. We're really losing 18, 19, 20, something in that range from the plan anyway. So this is not a huge imposition on LAPD. I know you like to keep it constant as far as your training academy goes, cadre goes, but realistically, it's not a huge number, and that could easily be added to the other classes for the remainder of the year. It's 2, 3 people at the most.
They can be added as we go forward. The issue for us is, it's always easier for us to keep smaller classes than to have
I
a
agree.
class, not a class, maybe a class.
Yeah, I understand. Those are the tough job you have. I understand.
If I could ask one more question of you, Sharon. You said that we as the policymakers have to give you direction. I personally strongly believe in saying what I'm saying, and I'm wondering if with your comeback to council, you'll give me some clarity on this. No furloughs from my end, okay? And hire to attrition. And I want to see how those numbers then shake out, because then we need to go to other parts of the police budget and tighten it up. But I do not, and that's just me, I can't speak for my colleagues, want to see any furloughs or not hiring to attrition. Will that help you with the formula?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
One thing also we need to make sure of as we walk through this, because also both public safety departments rely heavily on EAA. As we talk about these moves, we really need to know, depending on how far we go in those layoffs, how it will begin to impair the public safety's operational plan. So we need, because of some of those positions such as ITA and others are almost exclusively ITA, we need to make sure that we understand what that impact is.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, if I would request that, since we're going to bring this back, could we have that as a joint meeting with the Public Safety Committee, since that really impacts
That'd be great.
that committee's functions, just on that one item?
With number 13?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that.
Mr. Chairman, so on the issue of deferring or holding off on notification of the new class, it sounds to me that we're really just talking about 1 week here. If the notification was going to be done on Friday, and we're all expected to be back here in 2 weeks, and it's a 1 week. No?
I don't think you have that kind of time.
We just say yes or no.
Oh.
Yeah, and like Greg
would
said,
need
we're
to
only
know now.
talking about half a class.
Right.
You have 8 months to make up the half a class. All right, we go to number 14.
Yes, item number 14.
Before we start.
Ben Sahal with the Mayor's Office. Just wanted to get some clarification as to the proposal, or the recommendation that would be moving forward for this committee.
Basically, on number 13, we are asking, Part A of it is we're asking the CAO to move forward on the negotiations. We're not moving forward the emergency declaration as relates to the furloughs. We're asking that negotiation goes forward and that we get some hopefully firm report back in 2 weeks to determine where he is in the negotiations and how it will impact the issue of furloughs. Secondly, Part B is that we are recommending that we defer the October 14th class, and that we consider, and that's appropriately brought up, is that that's roughly half of the class, because we are currently, I think, 17 positions over TO, that we defer that class at least in consideration between now and the next 8 months of review, that we have classes scheduled, that you make up the other half of that class.
And the second part, well, the 13 Part B, is this would be a recommendation that the full council would have to?
Yeah, the full council is going to get this report. We hope to get it there this week. Go back to number 14.
Item 14 relates to the police and fire shared sacrifice and responsibility. We recommend that you approve that to instruct our offices to address those budget shortfalls if the ERIP is approved, which has happened. So approve recommendation number 14. Recommendation number 15 is to instruct CAO to submit operational plans that include hours, service level changes, et cetera, upon council adoption of the budget balancing operational plan. We would recommend that you hold this one recommendation in committee as we will be coming back to you with a revised operational plan. Item number 16 is to, as we were considering a number of operational plans last week, there were a number of departments that indicated that they wish to submit some alternative proposals. As such, and with the adoption of ERIP, I think every department is going to have an opportunity to submit some alternative proposals. So we would actually recommend that you approve this recommendation to instruct us to report back with revised alternate operational plans as it relates to not only to these specified departments, but to all departments. And I believe a number of your colleagues had indicated some concerns with very specific components of some of the departmental operational plans, and we intend to address those concerns as we go through this secondary review.
Let me just ask that we had one motion that we took off agenda today, and it's dealing with Department of Aging under Council File 08-0600.
I'm sorry, what was the number again?
08-0600-S70. That deals with Department of Aging. If we could add them to that review in number 16, and also if we could add number 18 as part of Bureau of Engineering's review, so that we get that back as a package as it relates to Mr. Rosenthal's concern about the West LA. So
Thank you.
I'll come back with Bureau of Engineering, along with we included Mr. Rezar's concern on also CD14 that would be a part of number 16.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. And my concern was not only looking out to make sure that our projects keep moving forward, but the idea behind cutting one position and the whole project's going to stall when you have this so much investment already, and we're possibly going to have to board it up and wait for some time before we could get it back to work. It just doesn't make sense that we would take out $70,000 to start a stop a multi-million-dollar project from moving forward. I mean, that applies to several other projects that we had in the operational plan.
And finally, with regard to your recommendation number 17, this recommendation came out of the Budget Committee, and that was to the extent possible to exclude Recreation and Parks, Library, Convention Center, and Housing Department from any further reductions. We would recommend that you approve that recommendation and send that forward as well.
I'd just like to amplify on that. And the reason for at least libraries and Rec and Park is the fact that they both are funded by a charter percentage as to property tax, and what our view is there is that if they're not impacting the general fund, that they should be allowed to operate within those funds. We've made comments on Convention Center and the fact that other than debt service, that they've been weaned off of the general fund. But we also need to address the other two items that are pending that deals with their ability to negotiate cost as opposed to going to RFP. And then there was one other issue on Convention Center that we wanted to what was it? Negotiate cost. Which one?
You're talking about the flexible pricing?
Flexible pricing.
It was flexible
Yes.
pricing, but it was one other that they had asked that we consider as part of their operational plan, I'll figure it out.
We'll get with the department.
Okay, the flexible pricing is one. And then on housing department, they're exclusively grant funded without any general fund. So that's the rationale for those 4 departments. And then, like I said earlier, number 18 will go into the report back with Bureau of Engineering regarding Mr. Rosenthal's issue.
And, Mr. Chair, in working with the CAO and the mayor's office this morning, we did come up with a few other additional instructions that we recommend that you add to the committee report. I don't know if Mr. Serrano wants to go through those.
Would those be more affiliated with number 3, because most of those things we're going to get report backs to the committee, or are those issues going to be going to council as part of this report?
There is one recommendation. I don't know if Mr. Serrano.
Well, our recommendations are probably better tied to item 7, because 13 really has to do with more of the resolution.
Yeah, number 7, I'm sorry. So if we
They're both tied.
concur with the recommendations on 13 that we just received from the CLA and conferred with by the CAO, we can move item 13 to the council, and we'd ask the clerk whether we can try to get that to council this week. Now, with additional recommendations, we can go to item 7.
Okay, Ms. Parks,
Yes.
if I could, just so I want to be clear on this, Mr. Chairman. I am saying right now that I support the class that's about to start in 2 weeks, and that we hire to attrition and we find a way to balance the budget without impacting that class. I think that is part of the rhythm of getting us and keeping us in the attrition mode, and I don't want to play around with that figure. And I'd like to know if you feel any uncomfort. I feel uncomfortable not saying going forward. I want to go forward. I don't want to use it as a negotiating tool either. Pardon me?
No, I was just saying we can vote separately on the one item then.
Yeah, I'd like to vote separately on that item.
All right, so we'll move item 13 as...
I missed Mr. Rosenthal's point. I'm sorry,
My point is, I want that class to start, period,
Yeah.
in 2 weeks, and I want us to find a way to make that happen, because I want to hire to attrition.
that'll still help us with attrition, not the additional.
Yeah, it's the attrition thing I'm worried about. I don't want to delay it, I don't want to postpone it, I don't want to even deal with it, other than we want to hire to attrition and find a way to work this budget so that we can continue to do that. I don't want to put any flexibility on the next class.
Yeah.
Let me just say, again, I guess we'll vote individually on number 13B, is that in the rationale, and certainly as you tried to articulate before, is that our hope that we get an entire plan back from the CAO, CLA as it relates to police department and fire as a public safety, and that we hope also that in addressing the issue of deferring the class, that we can compensate for that over the next 8 months. And so so if we want to have an individual vote on 13B, yes, Mr. Weezar.
If we are agreeing with Mr. Rosenthal's point on not jeopardizing the attrition levels, how would we vote then?
You vote no on the CLA's recommendation?
On that item, yeah. But how would that then express? Okay, I'll vote no on that.
Okay, Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Rosenthal?
No.
Okay, I have a yes. So it's 2-2 on item 13B. Go to the council. And the rationale that we gave earlier. Okay. So now we'll move the item other than, and with 13B as the only item that is not unanimous. So then we go to 7.
Okay, so on item 7, which was the report back on the status of the operational plans, furloughs, layoffs, and so forth, we do have a number of recommendations that we'd like to put forth to the committee. These would be instructions for both the CAO and general managers in conjunction with the CLA. If I may read those, number 1, instruct general...
Ray, let me interrupt one thing. If I understand it, on item 7, our issues that we're looking there for are holding this item into committee, and these reports will be coming to committee before they go to council. Okay?
Yes. Okay, the first instruction is to all general managers to determine on an informal basis the number of potential ERIP participants, and also to report on the number of vacant special fund vacancies for the purposes of identifying transfer opportunities to generate general fund savings. So we'd like the general manager report back to the CAO's office.
Okay.
Second instruction, direct the CAO to report to EERC for bargaining instructions for implementing furloughs on all other non-coalition city employees. Third, instruct CAO to monitor and review coalition budgetary solutions to ensure that the anticipated savings of $7 to $8 million are achieved, monitored, and tracked, and to report on those savings and solutions in the FSRs. And then lastly, instruct the CLA and the CAO to report back on the feasibility of achieving savings by implementing coalition proposals on non-coalition bargaining units and employees.
Okay. Let me just ask, from your instructions, would we need to send these to the council to endorse those, or can we do that from the committee to get the information that you want?
I think you probably should send them to the council, but we're going to get started on these no matter what. We have to sit down. We met with the CLA and mayor's office earlier this morning to go over these recommendations and to start putting together a game plan.
Okay. Let me give you a couple more that we can add on item 3, that we also, to the committee, get a report back, and we hope to get this by 9/28/2009 Budget and Finance Committee, on the unrealized special parking revenue transfer projected, and also its projection on the reserve fund and the balance at year end. Also, the recommendation of the CLA-CAO on the controller's recommendation regarding no transfers from the reserve fund, barring their repayment by the end of the fiscal year. And that's something on one of our other reports that we asked for that language. They also direct LA Fire and City Attorney to proceed with the encheatment of fire hydrant special funds for the purpose of transferring the cheated funds to the reserve fund. Let's see, also, and then this may duplicate somewhat one of your previous ones, but on September the 14th, the CAO presented operational plans which the committee acted on and requested a report back, CAO to follow with the several departments regarding those plans. Requested also the CAO to report back on EAA portion of the operational plans and how to proceed to realize needed savings from EAA/non-coalition personnel by October 5th Budget and Finance Committee meeting. And then also a question as to respond to this: what is the outstanding holes to fill, taking into account the recent council action on the ERIP? So we need to know all of those things that are still hanging and need to be resolved. And then the next one is what implementation steps are needed to carry out the coalition plan, if there's more operational or administrative processes that need to be included. And what is the process for tracking savings, ensuring benchmarks for coalition plan are met, and then how will the coalition plan impact the reserve fund? Those are some additionals that we asked for those report backs to the committee so that we can move those items of information to the council. Colleagues, have any other concerns? So we will move item 7 with those recommendations. Ray, just so I'm clear, on the 4 that you gave, if we transmit those to the council for approval, so because they're directing departments to do certain things, and the ones that I read into the record that we will direct the CAO-CLA to do those activities and bring them back to committee. I don't think we need to move those to council.
Okay, and then I would just, for the recommendations I read in the record, we can leave them here in the committee as well.
I just want to make sure that the departments are being directed to cooperate with you. So if we need to send it to council, we can. The other ones that I read in seem to be more that we're directing you to bring us information.
As far as the instruction to general managers, the CEO, Miguel's been having meetings with departments, and I think we're comfortable holding that in committee as well. And we'll continue having perhaps a meeting this week with all the GMs to discuss some of the issues. So
all those items will leave on item 7 in committee, and our hope is that we can get the bulk of them resolved in the next 2 committee, Budget and Finance Committee meetings. Okay? So we'll move to item 7 with those directions.
okay, anything else on those 2 items?
I think we've exhausted our...
We got this? Okay.
Can I go? Yes.
Thank you.
We got, unless you have something, 2 items.
Okay, that should take us to item number 8. And that is an Office of Finance report relative to the feasibility of creating a pilot project to add additional collection agencies to the citywide collection program.
Well, that's what that's the look. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Pam Mooney from the Office of Finance, and I have Jeff Whitmore, our revenue manager, with us.
You have to speak up just a little bit more.
Sure. The Office of Finance was asked to look at the feasibility of adding some additional collection agencies to assist with the collection of delinquent debt. We were also asked to look at what were the legal aspects of adding collection agencies at the same time that we're currently under contract. So we have been meeting with the CAO and the City Administrative Officer, and they are advising that an RFP process is required to add additional collection agencies. Currently, we have 4 agencies, outside agencies, that are contracted to the city. 3 assist departments in collecting their debt, and there's 1 collection agency that assists the Office of Finance. These contracts, currently the first 3-year term would expire a year from now in September of 2010. There are 2 additional 1-year extensions that are still in place, and at this time, we are not recommending that we would stop those contracts because it would severely disrupt the revenue stream to the city. Right now, we have approximately 320,000 accounts that are out among these agencies. So while we do agree that we want to use every tool to collect every single dollar that's possible to the city, what we are looking at is trying to augment the existing process. And in so, this report is actually asking for permission to release an RFP for what's called secondary collections. So our existing collection agencies would have 1 year to try and collect the debt. If they're unsuccessful, what currently happens now is that those come back to the departments, and typically they're written off, and then we try to sell them. So we're looking at trying to add in a second process that would allow another set of agencies to take one shot at it for 6 months or a year before we actually write it off. One of the other concerns was trying to assist our local business community, and so we've identified 55 firms that may have an interest that are located in LA, that are in the financial area. So we'll try and do additional outreach to make sure they're aware of this opportunity if we're allowed to go forward. We're here. I know that you also wanted an update on what's happening with ambulance billing accounts and also DOT, the parking tickets. And
before we get into those, let's
Sure.
see if we can resolve some of the concerns about the proposal. One of the things that I was concerned with when I read your report is that it appeared as though it was being interpreted that the expanded vendors were for specifically or primarily for ambulance billing or from DOT. but in reading the motion, it appears that it's broadly stated that they would be there for all services in collecting revenue. They used in the preamble of their motion, they articulate or document the large number of dollars that are delinquent in those two areas, but I don't think the motion was set up to just direct these new resources to just those two areas. The second thing I had a concern about was that we got over almost 400,000 cases of delinquent bills of some type that are spread. What I get out of it is through three departments, primarily three agencies primarily, with one agency doing something more specific as to collect these bad debts. I didn't quite understand why, if we go out for another RFP, that we wouldn't be trying to expand the number of people on the primary side as opposed to hiring vendors and relegating them only on the secondary side, which appears that we would only be giving them work after the current companies have exhausted 1 year, and then they then come in for 6 months. I didn't quite understand why we didn't try to expand the primaries from 3 to as many as we can get when you figure 380,000 cases that go unresolved. And so maybe you could explain that to us.
Sure. Your first question about the addition of the ambulance billing and the transportation accounts. I think the initial motion anticipated that we were going to have all these new accounts coming online and that we would need additional agencies to assist with those accounts. We have not been able to really make much progress on the delinquent parking citations, mainly due...
Let's leave that as a separate issue. Parking and the issue of fire department, if we can keep those to the side and talk about the expanded number of vendors on our overall, our other debt.
And that may lead us to the first legal concern, and I'll ask the city attorney to join me, in that we have an existing contract that we went out to bid for debt and that we awarded those contracts. This is the second year of the third-year term. So those agencies that have been already awarded, that to add or expand agencies would require another RFP process.
No, I agree with that. I'm just saying, is it in the contracts as stated that these companies that are of record are the only ones that can get primary debt? I mean, is that part of their contract?
Our contracts initially with them say accounts that are under $3,000 will go to these agencies, to 3 of these agencies. Accounts that are over $3,000 currently come to the Office of Finance, and we have one vendor that assists us.
The contracts say they get all of those as opposed to setting a limit of what they get. Because
I'm not
I think
sure.
the intent for going through this process was that we go out for an RFP and we expand greatly the number of people that can attack the 380,000. That's what I thought we were trying to do.
In our initial concern, our initial conversations with the city attorney was that we have to respect the initial RFP process. So I think we'd have to go back and look.
I think we clarified it with council members that were interested. We couldn't just add people to the RFP.
Right.
But in going out to RFP, and I would agree that we shouldn't close down the current RFPs before 2012. But the new people that we're suggesting should come on, where does it say in our contracts that they'd be limited to secondary versus primary work?
We could, I'm not, Carmen, are you aware of that? Contracts are exclusive? We might have to look at that.
We would need to look back at that. I believe that under the previous RFP that we selected the top 4 to handle all of the collection matters that fall under the 3,000 or less, and that for us to do a new RFP at this time to bring any additional collection agencies under the primary collection would be in violation of the existing contract rights.
Because I think that's what we need to see, because I think the intent was, at least the impression I got, was we have 380,000 cases, they amount to almost $300 million. And so how do we bring on an army of people to try to resolve them? And I don't think anyone had in mind that you bring them on to say, let's just let the current free. And I don't know how they're divided up, but that's a significant workload for 3 companies, that if it were even, it's well over 100,000 cases per company, that then you're waiting and saying you work them a year, and then you have new people coming on secondary. So we need to see just why that would bind us from not making them primary, and what are the legal ramifications, because I do believe they need to go through RFP. I just don't understand why they're secondary as opposed to primary. We need to see what those legal limitations are.
Well, to bring them in at this point, it would be a violation of the existing RFP and the collection agencies that are party to that. But we need to see if there can be modification.
See if the issue is how did we bind ourselves? Did we bind ourselves? And if it's true, are there any ways in which we can expand the pool of vendors to address this overwhelming number of cases? So that's part one of it. And then from there, I think the issue, and again, I fully agree not to pull back on the current RFPs before 2012. Right. And if we go back out in 2012, we need to go well in advance before any of them expire. Right. And so those are all things we need to get resolved. Now, the other part of it, the LA Fire and LA DOT is a separate issue. Right. That from reading the report, it doesn't appear that we've resolved the concerns. It appears that the LA DOT is saying on citations, we need to work through this contract we have, and these things aren't available for a year. Office of Finance is saying, give it to us within 6 months so we can get on them. And then on the fire side, it appears that although we've changed the ordinance, we still haven't come to grips with when can they release them to outside usage. So those are the 2 side pieces that we need to find, because when we left committee a while back, we basically said, go get in a room and resolve this stuff before you come back. And then we read the report and it appears we haven't resolved.
Well, both the fire department and DOT are here as well. We have had many meetings with both departments. I think the DOT issue is a little different than the fire issue, that it's more contractual, and there may be some legal things that Amir would like to speak to. On the fire side, what I can tell you is that we have made a lot of progress, and we're still hoping to meet the October 1 implementation date. But the last piece of this has to do with what's called the Business Associates Agreement that will exist between the outside collection agency and the fire department, and that provides the additional protections that are needed to make sure that we're in compliance with HIPAA. That agreement, the fire department has advised, and Georgia's here, that they're ready to sign, but the city attorney is reviewing the last pieces to make sure we're in compliance. And the city attorney advised today that they believe we're still on track to meet the October 1 date.
Is the fire department here?
Yes.
The other thing with the fire department, does this tie into the handheld equipment we've been talking about, and also at some point in time the reallocation of personnel that are currently in the billing operation?
Yes, sir. Georgia Machara from the fire department. What this is that the current vendor that we're negotiating with for the handhelds has stated that they don't do collections. So this will augment what we're going to be doing anyway. The vendor will collect the receipts, and once they hit the certain statute of limitations, they will go and be referred through the city's vendor for collections.
Okay, now, what vendor will do that?
Our vendor that we're proposing, we're still...
So you go into RFP and you have a vendor?
Yes, and we're going to be coming back to council with that information.
This is in addition to the vendor that provides the machine?
Yes, we have a billing vendor, and we also have the handheld vendor as well, so there's 2.
And so that's something you'll be coming to us fairly soon?
Our goal is to make it to the Board of Fire Commissioners by October 20th. And once we get through the board, then we come to council.
And is that also October 20th, the day that we implement the handhelds?
No, once it goes to the board, it has to go through the mayor and the council review and approval process because we have contracts that need to be approved. And then once the council approves the contracts, there's a 90-day window in which the vendor then can order all of the handheld devices, and then we can deploy them into the field. So there will be a lag time.
Are the handhelds and the collection vendor that you're looking at, they're going to go online at the same time?
Actually, the collection vendors can start sooner. They can actually start with the paper 902Ms and actually start processing those for us. And then once, during that 90-day window, and then once the handhelds come online, then they'll integrate, and there'll be a full-blown service.
Okay. And so the fire department's worked out issues other than the city attorney's review of the contract with the outside collection vendor?
For your collections. We have, yes, we've worked through all of our issues. I think right now it's with the city attorney's office in terms of all the HIPAA requirements because of the changes at the federal level. And so we have, in fact, we have a file that has $51 million in accounts that's been encrypted, and we're going back and forth doing tests with the vendor to make sure that when we send over the information, it meets the HIPAA regulations. And so as soon as the agreement is finalized by the city attorney and we sign it, we're ready to send off those collections.
I understand there's the two collection vendors, the one that you're hiring, and then it moves, once they exhaust it, it goes to finance.
That's correct.
So those are the two vendors.
Those are the two vendors.
You feel once the material is approved by the city attorney, then your whole operation is a go?
We're ready to go. We have those files, and we're just waiting to do the. We have ITA staff and NCO IT staff that are working together right now to make sure that whatever data we submit, they can accommodate. And so we're fine tuning that, and we're ready to go as soon as the agreement's signed.
Okay. And then, and also the final question I have in the sense of how you're addressing this is that. Is there something you got to come back for council, or is everything done as it relates to your process? You mentioned earlier, fire commission's got to approve something. Does council have to approve it also for you to meet your due dates?
In terms of the handheld and the data collection and the billing, what will happen is we are preparing a report to the Board of Fire Commissioners with the contracts attached and all the information on the staffing. I think you had requested a couple of months ago. And all of that, once it's approved by the board, will then get transmitted to the mayor's office, who will in turn send it to the CAO and then ultimately to the council for final approval. And we can't implement until it's approved by the city council.
Any questions on fire and the other collection, then before we get into LADOs?
Have you had any indication from companies that would be interested in the secondary marketing or secondary collection of interest?
We have people that are interested in perhaps doing some legal work, but we are working with the city attorney. Currently what happens is accounts that come back in our office, since finance is a large portion of the accounts that are outstanding, we do refer accounts to the city attorney for litigation. I know they did an RFP a few years back, and they have a couple of firms on retainer with them to also pursue accounts. So
you're talking about putting somebody in the middle of that process now, a secondary attempt to get money. And it's been my experience, there's not a lot of people that want to do that because it's just not that profitable.
That may be
it's really hard money to get.
Yeah, I think you're right, because we're at the very end of the collection. The debt is very aged. Right now, our primary agencies are not having a lot of luck because the debt is very aged when it actually gets there, along with the recession.
In business, 6 months is when you
Yes.
go to the secondary.
Right.
So we're at a year.
Yeah.
You're just not going to collect that kind of money usually.
I'm not sure, if
Okay.
there is. We're just really trying to use every tool there may be.
Okay. The final thing I had was on the issue of classification that we talked about before. Have we resolved that as to what is truly bills and what the government will not allow us to collect, so we no longer are showing them as one pile?
Yes.
In fact, we have no ability to collect them?
Yes, in fact, puts a smile on my face because we have taken down, if you originally looked at the CAFR and saw the fire department's outstanding receivables, it was in the range of $500 million. We have gone back to the Board of Review. We bifurcated that. We've taken off those accounts that were mandated that we adjust down, and with the help of Jeff and the fellow other members of the Board of Review, we actually were able to write off $240 million of that. In addition to that, we have another $50 million.
You say write off?
Write off completely, that's
No.
adjust, I'm sorry.
No, but the key is that term will cause people to think that we've not collected.
Oh.
It's illegal. What I understand is illegal for us to
Yes.
even request.
Those are required by law that we
That's-
take off our books because they will not pay us for us. So it's been showing as a receivable, and we have now fixed that. So we've adjusted that off.
Okay.
There we go.
That's the new word.
And so anything that's been outstanding, we are ready to send off. And so as soon as we get this business agreement finalized, we'll have more in the range of probably about $100 million left over, which we'll actively be working on and sending over to the Office of Finance when the time is right.
If I remember correctly, I think your goal was to be totally operational with the handhelds and everything was like January something?
In the budget, the council did adopt that a January timeframe, but unfortunately, because we've had such, the contract process and going through the contracts with the city attorney has been a very lengthy process. Very lengthy. And we are finalizing liquidated damages at this time because it is a complicated contract, and we'll explain that to you more in council.
Let me just ask the CAO if we could ask you to work with them to get whatever they need, the hurdles in the road, to get with the city attorney to get that approval, to get this implemented. If all their pieces are in place, and they now have a new term of adjusted versus waiver, those things, that we can try to get back online for that January time period so they can be moving forward on that area.
Thank you.
Now we can deal with LADOT. That seems to be the one issue that is unresolved.
Amir Sadati, Assistant General Manager. Thank you, Council Member. We're a little puzzled also. This is our first time looking at this report. We've been working with Office of Finance, as mentioned here, so you're right. We did sit in the room. We worked out all the different issues. The main issue at the time was the existing contract that we have with our vendor, and changing the terms to 6 months or anything else would have been significant and very costly, not to mention the interruption to the revenue stream as mentioned in this report. So we have the same problems. But what was accepted was having years 4 and 5 be able to give into one of the existing agencies with the Office of Finance. And that's what we met and we worked on. And as I mentioned, we're just seeing now that this report is possibly suggesting a new RFP to be issued, and again, the 6-month issue has come up. But we have been working towards that. Our offices have met. I believe the vendor also met with the Office of Finance, explaining some of the details of it. If you recall, last time we were here in California, parking citations goes with the license plate, not the driver. And that's one of the biggest challenges when the DMV doesn't cross-reference those things. And any third party that would want to collect on parking citations would have to go to DMV and get their own registered owner code and request that. We, as a department, worked with our current vendor without any amendment to the existing contract to be able to provide license plate information and citation information for years 4 and 5. And what I believe was the next step was to figure out the infrastructure, the cost associated, and how we get the data back and forth. Because we have scofflaws and people that don't pay for 5 tickets or more get booted, get towed. And if these people are paying on one side to this third-party collector, there has to be an interface that we know almost real-time or the next day when these people have paid, so we're not towing their cars inadvertently. So that's where we had left it, Council Member, and I'm not sure where this particular recommendation is coming, or maybe we can get clarification if LADOT's parking citation and the 6 month is part of this RFP or not, because I couldn't tell from the report.
It was not. I mean, we think that the issue with DOT is still open. Our recommendation was to go ahead with another RFP process to assist with all of the debt, all of the things that we currently have. If DOT were to be added at some point, just as ambulance billing is, then certainly these vendors would be available for collection. So we understand there are contractual issues with DOT and their outside vendor. Our office is currently doing a review of the DOT billing and collection activities. That report will be out in a couple of months, and there will be some specific recommendations. Also, the outside consultant that's looking at centralization of billing and collection, their report is, underway. They're working through the process, so we may have some more recommendations on that. It is Finance's position that this is a significant receivable that's on the city's books, and that we think that the city should look at how to get at those unpaid parking tickets, and that's really what we're saying in this report. That
one thing I think we're about where we were last meeting is that there's a difference of opinion, but nobody's resolved whether their contention that they have some contractual agreements and the legal issues and material becoming available, whether that's being considered strongly in the Office of Finance recommendations, because you're telling us 6 months, they're telling us 3 or 4 years. That's a great disparity in this debt issue, and so again, we're no closer than what you articulated to us the last time we were at the committee.
I think there's a couple of things, and part of it, as you said, is a legal concern.
Is the legal concern legitimate? Because it appears from Office of Finance's standpoint, they're acting as though it's not legitimate, or they are ignoring it. LADOT is sitting there saying it is legitimate, and you're leaving us, and I don't want to break a tie without having information, but we just do not appear that you stayed in the room long enough. I don't know.
Oh, no, I was just going to say part of it is my understanding is a legal opinion was given about the information that could be released. For instance, the existing contractor, if we were going to have a secondary collection agency, could only provide the car license number, for instance, and that really would not be a significant amount of information to be able to give to a secondary vendor to try to effectuate collection. So my understanding of the interpretation of the California Vehicle Code is that came from their attorney, that probably should be reviewed by city attorney as well, just to see if they concur.
Councilmember, this is Steve Ongala from the Office of the Mayor. I just wanted to provide a little clarification. When the ACS contract was put in place, I remember I worked for another council member at that time, the chair of Budget and Finance Committee, and it was a 5-year contract, and I do remember that it is the Office of Councilmember Parks that wanted it actually to be a shorter contract because we didn't believe that the contract was done in a proper manner, and therefore, in order to get a compromise, we agreed with DOT and other council members. Councilmember Grul, I remember, agreed that we would have 3 years and probably 2 years of optional renewals. Unfortunately, these years are coming and going, and without council getting a report back relative to how the contract had been going for the past 3 years. The reason the options were there was for City Council to be updated on how this was working. Having said that, I do believe that the current contract is possibly expiring in March next year. Is that correct, Amir?
March 2011.
March 2011.
Is that with the option years?
So
it is a 5-year contract.
It was 5, we didn't end up with 3 and 2?
No, I wasn't here, and I don't know what the council approved, but I'm pretty sure it was a 5-year contract.
It was well, there are, the last 2 or 3 years are optional contracts. I mean, we can get the report. I was involved in the process, and I know that very well.
Robert Andelon is the contract administrator. I don't know if he has a copy of the contract with him, but he can probably speak on that.
Robert Andelon, Department of Transportation. The contract was for a 5-year term. There was month-to-month extension opportunities if, in fact, at the time the contract was going to be reviewed under the new RFP, that there would be an opportunity for the city to extend the services on a month-to-month basis.
So should I understand it therefore that there were no options for the city to exercise, whether to extend the contract or to have did the city have an option to cancel the contract?
The city always has the option to cancel the contract
No.
based upon the contract language.
So you're saying there's no options currently, 5 years, and it's 2011. Okay, let me just see if we can resolve it.
And, yeah, just additionally, as part of, again, us working towards moving forward, as Mr. Whitmore mentioned, there's a few more information consultant coming. So the department has already began the RFP for that particular contract, for the new RFP for citywide citation processing. And we were waiting for the partial central billing implementation and the other consultant to see what information is going to be sought or be recommended that we can put in. But as part of the new RFP that I think we should be able to get out probably before the end of the year, so you're talking maybe a few more months, all these additional options can be costed out, whether it's 6 months, council member, whether you want to give it after 1 year, 6 months, 120 days. All of those things will be in a new RFP that can be then costed or given to everybody that they can bid back and give you those prices, whether we give it to this new city collector, another third party, doesn't matter. But I just want to give you that heads up and
One thing I
follow.
don't understand is that if we have a contract that you say goes to 2011, what is the new RFP going to provide us if we can't break that contract?
A new RFP will be out on the streets, again, trying to provide a better contract for us, get better pricing and further options. As you recall, that model was different. This is a new model.
The RFP you're talking about would come into effect after the 2011 contract expires?
That's correct.
Okay, that's
And if I might, just to sort of, we need, for this particular issue, I think we need to have time. This is one of those issues where you need time to do the RFP, you need to have plenty of time to do the review. There's always a lot of people that get involved in this process. So I would say this is one of those contracts where you need to have a little bit of time built into this process.
Let me just ask a couple of things. So the committee will appear that it's sane because we did ask for this, is that I think what we need, and we're not stopping the RFP, but we need a couple of things just so that we're all on the same page. We need the first issue about the primary contract language from Office of Finance to come back and show us why we've limited these 3 companies for 300,000 plus cases, and whether we can expand that.
And I would maybe add the city attorney to come back with some of the legality of it.
We also need, as we directed the city CAO to work with LA Fire to keep their program online and hope that we can meet the January 2010 date. Then the second part that we need to report back on is that LADOT's, this unresolved issue as it relates to the implementation of the proposal by Department of Finance versus their view as it relates to the legal ramifications and stuff. So we need those to report back within the next couple of weeks so we know what direction this project is going in. And again, once we find out that information, I think we can get some more clarity as to what we want the 2 departments to do or whether we have any authority to do anything. We certainly need to understand, because what Steve mentioned, that's what my recollection was, it was 3 and 2, not 5. And so we need to verify that information on the current contract, because there was a great deal of discussion in T committee about limiting it to a short period and having options, because we knew the RFP for all meters and all those issues were going to hit the street, and we didn't want to tie ourselves down for 5 years with no options. So if we can verify the issue of the contract with, what is it, ACS, verify the primary language of the contracts for the Office of Finance vendors, those are the 2 things we need within a couple of weeks, and then we determine what the rest of this stuff will go.
I would recommend that you hold it for 2 weeks, get the report back from the city attorney on the primary contract. I would also ask for perhaps an opinion on the whole legality of this license plate data And it sounded like there was some opinion rendered by ACS, but we should have get our attorneys on board with that as well.
What is being said is ACS as having won that contract with the city for the citation processing. They have the relationship with DMV to get the registered names and addresses in order to then collect. What their attorney has come back and reviewed, that giving additional information, it's called registered owner information, to a third party is prohibitive to them, and that they can provide license plate and ticket and anything else that's on a ticket that's public record, but the actual where people live and who the car is registered to is not going something that they could provide. So that's what our conversation with the Office of Finance is. We're willing to give all of that up, almost $80 million worth of uncollected debt for their collection agency to do, and that's where we were stuck, council member, is the infrastructure of this data transferring between the two departments.
Yeah.
That's where we got stuck.
One of the things I think also is important when we come back with the city attorney issue on LADOT's concerns is that we need to find out whether not only the length of the contract, but also whether the company is in full compliance with the contract if they can't actually retrieve the collections that were part of their original deal. They were supposed to get collections to what we understood, and if they can't do that because of the limitations, are they in violation of their own contract? So we need to know all that, then we can give some clarity as to what the next step would be.
And
so we can...
Councilmember, just to clarify about the DMV issue, because it is pivotal to this whole conversation, that the Office of Finance has a contract with the DMV also for our collections. We believe that ACS has a contract with the DMV as an agent of the city, and therefore we believe that perhaps it can be reassigned, and why we would like our attorney to look at it as an agent of the city to another agent of the city. But it is pivotal.
Another job. So if you can include all that. Right. No, that's what we need. We need that clarity. Let me ask you the simplest question of the day. Why is the internal operation on collections at about a 4% higher than the external?
I believe part of it has to do with, we're looking, these are our internal collectors that are in the city. They have built-in relationships with the different departments. They're also working on the higher dollar accounts. They work directly with the city attorney on settlements. We have a settlement authority. Our outside agencies, the lower collection rate is really probably more aged debt. So age is a significant reason that the departments are getting better, but
And so it's the age of debt and also...
Age debt, it's a lesser volume, so I think that they're doing high volume accounts, so they take a few tries and they're more or less churning the accounts and looking to get what they can and moving on to the next one.
Your internal people are working on...
We're working on $5,000 and
but they're working on most of the debt that belongs to them in that department.
Yes, that's right. And they have, they're able to cut through a lot of the contacts, plus they also have, the settlement authority within our own office.
All right. So if we can have 2 weeks on item 8 and come back with hopefully some clarity.
That long just to write all that up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But our goal is not to hear it a third time.
I understood.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item number 9 is the Office of Finance report relative to the 2009 tax penalty amnesty program.
Are you going to take comments?
No. He wants to go after.
Okay.
Number 9.
Good afternoon, Antoinette Cristobal, Office of Finance. You should be receiving a revised copy, rather updated tax amnesty program results.
Can we have quiet in the back, please?
Our report that was sent initially was as of August 28, and at the time we had substantially completed processing all of the tax amnesty applications, but we knew that we still had some that were outstanding. So it's good news from the standpoint that the tax amnesty receipts as of September 21st is $20.6 million.
Is that a gross number?
That's a gross number. There's a table on page 2 which breaks out the amnesty receipts by revenue type. The majority of the receipts are business tax receipts, which we anticipated, and that's where the $10 million was included in the budget under business tax revenue.
So if I read your chart correctly, you would be showing somewhere around 13 million net.
Yeah, that's correct, because we, as part of the amnesty program, the penalty was waived if you paid the principal and interest amount due. So that is correct. 7.1 million in penalties were waived. But the good news is that the program was very successful. It more than doubled the $10 million goal. The bad news is that the 20.6 million, the majority of that has already been accounted for by the CAO in their August financial status report. I'm sure Ray was thinking that there was an additional $2 million that could be added, but majority of that has already been accounted for. And just to let everyone know, the business tax receipts, at least through August, was $12.6 million higher than the budgeted amount of $9 million, and the majority of that, as you can see from the report, really is amnesty related. Of course, there were some additional collections that were made by the department as well. But this program was very successful. We are in compliance mode, and we have stepped up our enforcement plans, and we are vigorously pursuing the collection of outstanding taxes that are due, including the penalty.
And then the $250,000, that came from where to fund the program?
The $250,000?
Yes.
I believe that was absorbed by the departments. I don't know if they were
It was
ever...
a general fund expense.
Yeah, general fund
Department
expense, right.
absorbed it, yeah.
But just to let you know, in terms of the staff that were transferred, on page 3 at the bottom, it talks about the 7 staff, they collected $2.1 million of the $20.6 million and handled over 8,300 phone calls, because the calls went into the hotline, and certainly other public counter offices accepted calls and payments as well, and they processed 2,100 work items.
And this $20 million includes those payments that were deferred over time, or is that additional money? I understood in one of your reports that you said there were funds that you gave people a time payment.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. The $20.6 million is the collection of outstanding taxes.
But in your report, you reflected on the one, August 28th, there's like 1.8 million that you allow people to pay on a...
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
plan.
Included in, yes, if you go to page 2, included in the $20.6 million is $1.6 million in outstanding business tax installment agreements. The ordinance was set up as such where if a taxpayer wanted to enter into an installment agreement, they could do that for business taxes, and it's a 12-month installment. If they don't pay the full principal and interest over the 12-month period, we will not waive the penalty. So that's why when you look at the table, we have not waived any of the penalties for those outstanding
That 1.6
accounts.
is included in your 20.
That is correct.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. We'll move that item. Or before we do that, Mr. Farrer, do you have a...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies to you. In my excitement about being able to speak today, I wrote the wrong agenda number on there, and I wanted to speak to 8. So I asked the people who were involved in that if they would stick around so I wouldn't be talking behind their back.
Okay, let me do this. Let's move item 9.
Okay.
We'll move your card to number 8.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll reconsider 8 in your comment.
On item number 8, my name is David Farrer. Most of you know me. I've been a lawyer here in Los Angeles for many years, represented the city as its lead lawyer on the Staples Center, have previously served as chairman of the Community Redevelopment Agency for the city of Los Angeles, and have for the last several years been affiliated with a law firm which has one product, and that is collecting government revenues, accounts receivables for governments. And as such, the law firm has made a proposal to the city a couple times in the past. We've not been successful for some technical reasons, and I want to go into those. Currently, we are collecting for the County of Los Angeles, for the Treasurer Tax Collector, and we are doing secondary placement collections for the County Department of Health Services. And I speak with some authority. I'm not here lobbying for this particular law firm, but I do want to share with you some realities about the construction of a collection program that I think would result in maximum revenue production for the city. And I want to say I absolutely and enthusiastically support what the Department of Finance is proposing, which is that you do a secondary collection program. The reason for that is most of you know about an account receivable. It's valuable on day one, and it becomes less valuable every single day later. So that the best possible practice in collections is to aggressively pursue that account by your own people early on, to refer it very quickly to a primary collection agency who will do a good job for a very low fee. And if they fail at it, if they can't do it, after they give up, and you talked about 6 months and a year or whatever time that is, after they give up, to give it to somebody else as a secondary collection and let them try as hard as they can. And after a certain period of time, if they give up, you got two choices. You can either factor the accounts and sell them to somebody for a nickel on a dollar or whatever, or you can write them off. The city has moved, I would hope more quickly than they have, but they have moved, I think, progressively towards complying with that model of the most efficient way to collect. Low-cost people up front, higher-cost people at the end. Now, that brings me to the real reason that I want to address this committee, and I understand this is back. Okay. It's back. First of all, most of the people who are in the secondary collections business, or a high percentage of those, are law firms. They're not up at the front. They're not competing with the collection aid, but most of them are law firms in secondary collection. And that's the problem that I have with the way the city is currently structured, with the silo being the city attorney's office and another silo being the Department of Finance. Because when we responded to the Department of Finance's RFP for secondary collections, we were told that was a really great idea, except only the city attorney under the city charter has an opportunity to hire law firms. So what I would like to request, that however you go forward with this motion, that it be amended to include collection agencies and law firms, and that if the city council determines that the city attorney should get involved and be a co-issuer of the RFP, or in fact issue the RFP, that be a part of the resolution and motion by the council, so that law firms are not precluded from responding to this RFP.
When this item comes back, we'll ask Ray to have some material to evaluate what you said.
Thank you.
Okay, that's item 8, so we'll move item 8 as directed. I think we have one more item.
Yes, we have item 12.
Okay, yes. We have 2 cards, and then Mr. Huizar will lead that discussion. Mr. Edward Flores and Stephen Jimenez.
Could begin, introduce yourselves and begin.
Good afternoon, committee members and councilmen. My name is Edward Flores. I am a 4th generation Olvera Street merchant. I am also a member of OSMA, the Olvera Street Merchants Association, and also a member of the Lease Discussion Committee. Regrettably, our president of OSMA, Vivian Bonzo, was unable to be present this afternoon. However, we wanted to convey to you a simple and short message that we are ready to begin lease discussions, and we're optimistic at this time through the process that we'll actually be able to conclude it. We're also ready, we're willing and able, and we've formed a committee for this purpose of merchants, and all we're waiting for is for our beloved general manager, Mr. Andrade, to set forth a proposal for us to look at and begin the process. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Stephen Jimenez, and I provide pro bono consultation to several of the merchants to get them through this process. I basically came here with Mr. Flores just to make sure that he was here to make the presentation on behalf of the merchants that have participated. We do have a committee that's ready to go. We're just waiting for the city to get their documents together and give us the proposal.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. I understand the general manager from El Pueblo will present this item and give us a status report. This item is here because during budget deliberations, there was a discussion about El Pueblo and this committee and the city's goal of making El Pueblo self-sufficient on its general fund dollars. And we asked, and the leases is one component of making that possible, and we asked the general manager to come back September 1st with a status report on the adoption of the leases at El Pueblo, outstanding leases. And although it's not officially in the request of the general manager, we were hoping to have a template of what the leases may look like with a follow-up request that the other leases be executed by December 31st. So the general manager is here to present his report. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Robert Andrade, General Manager, and I thank our merchant for the kind words. As Councilman Huizar pointed out, back during council deliberations, our department was directed to go ahead and prepare or instructed to report back in September as well as December relative to the status of lease negotiations, merchant lease negotiations on Olvera Street. Lease negotiations have not started. However, the city attorney had advised us that one of the pieces that's critical that the department is in the process of determining is the legitimate representation of business owners. This requires a notarized letter from each business indicating their representation or whether or not they would be representing themselves. This appeared to be a difficulty in the last round of negotiations that was a lesson learned from the city attorney. So we wanted to be able to definitively, we want definition as to exactly who we're going to be negotiating with and that they are the legal representation for that business. Just by way of background, there are 61 merchants that are on month-to-month concession agreements. As all of you are probably well aware, that long-term lease negotiations with existing merchants actually provided some legality for that under the charter. However, the charter did not specify that length of term. They simply said long-term leases. Right now, Olvera Street merchants account for an estimated $74,000 revenue per month for El Pueblo. That is an estimated $887,000 annually. That represents approximately a quarter of our budget. The city negotiating team is composed of department management, the office of the city attorney, and the office of the mayor. And throughout the summer, this team has met to discuss and refine the city's position on key issues that we would be moving forward on these proposed rents, not the least of which, of course, is the market rate. It was just this past Friday that we received a draft update of the most recent market rate study by a third-party real estate consultant firm, Riggs & Riggs. This study actually augments the previous one that we had, and it updates up to August of 2009. So the figures that we have reflect the most recent market rate information. A second piece that's critical to us, along with the fair market rates, is that for us to establish that common area maintenance piece, and there was a lot of discussion about that during the budget deliberations. The city, we believe, bears an undue cost in CAM, and these include services for repairs, custodial, and security. In the spring of 2009, the department worked with GSD to release an RFP for a CAM study, a partner study, if you will, to the market rates. There were pre-approved lists of these firms from General Services Department. However, the responding firms' proposals came back, and all of them were cost prohibitive. The least expensive of which was about $190,000 to conduct this study. $190,000 that we don't have. However, we brought the team back together, and working with the Bureau of Engineering and with General Services, we cobbled together a CAM study, of which it was done in-house, if you will. The chief legislative analyst right now is reviewing that study, and we hope to have that within a week to 10 days. So we will then have the two critical pieces of information from a financial standpoint that are absolute must for our leases: the CAM piece as well as the market rate study. And we know that critical to ensuring the future flexibility or future financial viability of our department is to reestablish this baseline equation that accounts for both market rates and CAM charges, and that there's adjustments for these things. In other words, we're going to be coming forward with adjusted CAM rate, adjusted market rate study, but also a trigger that will ensure cost of living, market trends, and any costs that we incur from GSD that are relative to the CAM. So that way you won't have to be dealing with general managers from Pueblo coming back and saying we're not covering our costs anymore, but these will have triggers that will automatically adjust per the market rate. Throughout the summer, the city attorney has been preparing tenant leases at the direction of the mayor's office as well as our office. Simultaneously, they've been advising the department on legal matters, and some of these were discussed previously for the internally proposed terms and conditions. As a sort of a side piece, the department has been working on revised late rent policies and revised encroachment policies, all of which will be part of the larger the lease document. It's our expectation that we'll come forward in late October, early November to go forward with these leases with our merchant representatives. We know that December 1st is an aggressive date. We hope to be able to meet that. We also know that we will be establishing a set time to negotiate, and once that time period is over, we will come back to the council with those people who have signed and those who have not, and make our recommendations at that time as well.
Great, thank you. And during the budget deliberations, we had anticipated that you would come to us September 1st with a template of the leases, and we don't have that today. Is there a reason why we don't have that today?
As I said, what we need to be able to do is roll in the CAM and the market rate. The rate is already, we received it on Friday. The CAM we're waiting for at least another week to 10 days from the CLA. The template itself really is completed, if you will. Mm-hmm. So we can certainly forward to you what that document is. The thing we want to be cautious of is, as we sit down and negotiate, we don't want to be showing our hand, if you will. Yeah. We can certainly go behind closed doors and express to you and let you know what those pieces are, and we'd be willing to do that at any time that's convenient for this body.
Okay. And so we definitely don't want to show our hand in terms of signability, duration of the leases, and what rates we're going to charge. Do you have a sense of what those are for the city's end? I mean, are we ready to go with those? We need the CAM charges, you said, and we have the report on you mentioned that was ready for you on Friday, the market rate, or the lease.
That's the market. Those are the market rate dollars. Yes, the revised rigs and rigs study we received this past Friday.
Okay, I thought that was available a few months ago.
Well, that was a draft piece, but what wasn't completed was the revision up to the August numbers of 2009, and that's what we were waiting for. We thought that once we go forward, we've been told in the past that if you're negotiating on market rates, the critical piece is about 6 months. After about 6 months, your numbers, up or down, may not be as viable. And so we want to get as current the information as possible and then move forward, so that way we're not wasting time.
Anything you need from the city council or from us to make sure we stick to our deadline of having these leases taken care of by December 31st?
The direction from council has been very direct, and we appreciate it. We look forward to your approval of our leases when we bring them forward to you.
Mr. Chair, I'd recommend if we could get another status update in 4 weeks on this item, if we could schedule it for 4 weeks from now. That's possible. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have the other items?
Nope, that's it.
We have no comment cards, so we're adjourned.
Pleasure.